We're here this morning to give you a lesson, which is going to be coming from Proverbs. Before we get started, let us have a word of prayer. Our most kind Heavenly Father, we come to you this morning just to say thank you, Lord. Thank you for just being so kind and so merciful. Thank you, Lord, for just waking us up early this morning, close in our right mind, able to come out and give you the praise that you deserve, Lord. We thank you for just blessing us and keeping us. Thank you for watching over us, and we slept in slumber last night. But most of all, Lord, thank you for your darling Son, Jesus Christ. Lord, help us to be able to relate your word out this morning, Lord, to where somebody may be able to receive it and it help them to be closer to you, Lord. Lord, forgive us for our sins if we sin and come short of your glory. In your darling Son, Jesus Christ's name I pray, amen. Well, good morning. We're here this morning. Our lesson for today is called Wisdom Feast. Wisdom Feast is coming from the book of Proverbs. Proverbs chapter 9, verses 1 through 6, verses 8 through 10, and verses 13 through verse 18. And Proverbs is an interesting book. It was talking about the book of Proverbs revealed two major themes. And the two themes that Proverbs focus on was wisdom and folly. Folly is a short for foolishness. It's described wisdom as knowledge, understanding, discretion, obedience, and instruction based on God's word and revealance of God. Folly is everything contradicted to wisdom. And in this lesson today, it said that the Old Testament provided God truth through the law, which was given by the priests. The wise man and the slaves gave the word, which was given by God in the wise counsel. But Solomon, the author of this lesson, was a slave that portrayed insight on the perplexities of life, of how wisdom and the folly of foolishness was compared. And in this lesson, Solomon uses two young ladies to try to illustrate the difference between wisdom and folly and the foolishness to where he was using. And in writing the first Proverbs 1 through 9, he said to hear the writer, which is Solomon, explores something on hidden at first, the beginning. He was talking about Lady Wisdom has evil opportunity, and the Lady Folly has brought both these two women together. They was gonna have a banquet, and both of them had a banquet they was gonna set up to invite people into it. It said that, but the outcome of these invitations was different. So we're gonna just explore what's the difference that Solomon wanted to bring out in this lesson. The first part of the lesson, I was reading about wisdom feast. They used in our focus this lesson. It was talking about, just to give you a little better understanding on what he was trying to bring out. It was a good illustration. It was about this older gentleman named James. James was an elderly man. His wife had just passed, and he had got to where he was feeling lonely. He had a son named Greg. Greg saw that his father was lonely and that he was missing his wife, so he was worried about it. And so Greg had a daughter named Carol, and he wanted Carol to start studying. It was during summer, right before school got started, and he asked his daughter Carol to stay with him. And Carol obeyed what her father had asked her to do, was to stay a few weeks with her grandfather. But the grandfather, he was still down from the death of his wife. So Carol was there joking around with the grandfather, tending to him and making sure he was all right. All right, but all while she was there, grandfather thinking more about the granddaughter than thinking about himself. He was asking her, why don't you go ahead and go spend your summer doing other things. And in doing so, but she was saying, grandfather, I was glad to be here with you during this time. So during their conversation, she gave her grandfather, he had heard that she had started dating this young man. And in doing so, she had met this young man online. This young man that she had met name was Quentin, but they had just been met online, and she had seen him a couple of times, and he had tried to convince her to move to go to college in the state where he was living, and that they was going to be a couple. Grandfather kind of was eerie of that, and he told her, he said, Carol, I know you know this guy, but you really don't know him. Would that be wise for you to move way off from your family to be with a person you really don't know? And the moral of the story is that you got to sometimes listen to elderly people for wisdom, because that does make common sense to where you just meeting a person, you met them online, because people gonna show you their best when they meet you. And when they first meet you, they want to show you their best. But you don't really truly know a person until you start spending more time with them. So the grandfather was eerie of it. But needless to say, a lot of younger generations don't think the elderly people wise. They think they old time and they think old. But the thing about it is wisdom comes with experience. If you got experience, that's what wisdom comes from. Solomon, in these verses, he wanted to illustrate the difference between wisdom and folly or foolishness, if you want to, for a better definition. He used wisdom as a young lady as well as folly as young lady. Both of these young ladies was having banquets. And the book of Proverbs chapter 9 verse 1 reads, it says that wisdom has built her house, and she had craved its 7 columns. And it said that she has prepared a great banquet mixed with wine and set the table. And so she had set her servants to invite everyone to come. She called out on the highest outlook of the city. So the first illustration that that Solomon is trying to bring out is that wisdom and foolishness is personally 2 young women. The first one he's going to illustrate is wisdom. It's a lady wisdom built a big house, a luxury house. Not only was a house built in such a fashion, she put 7 stone pillars in front of it to support it. 7 in this situation represent, in the Bible, number 7 represent completion and perfection. And in doing so, wisdom had a elaborate and a spacious house. And in doing this illustration, he wanted to illustrate that she not only have a big house and the way that she worked it. They say that she built her house herself. And that not only that she prepared a meal for the feast. It said that she had animals and mixed her own wine, and she did all what she had to do to get ready, set the table for all her guests that she had invited. And it goes on to say that she's not only fixed the table and compared everything that she needed to do for her guests. She was out overlooking the city and the house. She lived in a pretty nice house. And while she was overlooking the city, she seen people. And she sent out her servants, her maid servants, to invite everybody. Her first initial invitation was to everybody that wanted to come and feast with her. And in doing so, that it said that she craved her own wine. It said after this, she had set the maids to bid. She started off bidding for everyone. Everybody that wanted to come was invited. And then she went on to verse 4. It said, come in with me. She urged the simple. And when she used the word simple, she wasn't trying to defame anybody or embarrass anybody. But in the lesson, it said the simple was those who lack good judgment. Good judgment, and she said that that she wanted to invite it. Everybody was in it. The ones that had had good judgment and the ones that didn't. She didn't want to separate them. She didn't want people to think that she wanted just only certain people at her feast. So it said that wisdom has done her work, and she cried out for the place in the city. It was the people's response that makes the party possible. So she can get an invitation, but you have to get people have to respond to it. That's the same way with God. God give us an invitation to come into, that he will come into our lives, but we have to respond to it. Now, are you going to respond to it yes to God, or are you going to continue to do what you want to do? Go ahead.
Now, one thing that we were saying that she sent out the invitation to everyone.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing is, before she sent out the invitation, we see that wisdom was expressed to somebody who was already prepared.
Correct.
She already had built a permanent house.
Correct.
She already has completion, that number 7.
Correct.
They say she mixed the wine because she didn't want anyone to get drunk, so she watered it down.
Exactly.
You know, more for taste, but not for pleasure.
Correct. Correct.
So she has took all these things in place. Then she sent forth that invite everyone.
Correct.
All right, and like you saying, our problem today is we invite people, but you already know some people are going to reject you.
Yeah.
Just simply because they just think they know more than you.
Exactly.
You know, they're not willing to learn. They're not willing to build upon wherever they have. To me, they don't plateau.
Exactly.
You can't tell them nothing. You can't give them nothing.
Yeah.
You know, if you know everything, you're not willing to learn anything.
That's true. That's true. And doing that, she did invite everyone. And like I said, you did bring out a good point about she wasn't there to try to entertain them with so much wine and get them drunk. She wanted just them to be there. She mixed it with water. So she watered the wine down so that they can get an understanding. This invitation and what her feast was about is trying to get knowledge to people and more wisdom. She wasn't trying to feed them and get them drunk. She mixed the wine so that it could, the water would dilute the taste so that they wouldn't get drunk, so they could be mindful. Because, you know, you see a lot of people who engage in wine, and if you haven't seen a person who's drunk, they're not in their right mindset. So she didn't want to get them in a bad mindset. She wanted them to have a good time, but be able to receive what she was trying to give them. But it said that leave your simple ways and begin to learn to live. Learn to use good judgment. Her theme of her feast was she wanted to want all the people, the simple people that she used illustrations as the one who didn't have good judgment. She wanted them to leave all those simple ways behind, to think positive, be willing to explore and begin to live. He say, learn to use good judgment. And a lot of times we live in a society now that, and we see it all the time on the news, and you can't turn on the news where you can't see what somebody done something wrong or done killed somebody or something. That's lack of judgment, because they are not willing to receive the wisdom and being wise in their decisions. They like to make decisions before thinking about it, and that's lack of judgment. Go ahead, Brother Rico.
You know, I don't mean to talk about my president, but it to me is the perfect example. Mm-hmm. You may have wise people around you.
Yeah.
Knowledge on an area.
Yeah.
But you do not take in what they're telling you. You just depending on yourself.
Exactly.
And yourself lead you wrong every time.
Exactly. And our next verse 8, actually echoes what you just said, because you said, don't bother correcting markers. They will only hate you but correct the wise, and they will love you. Verse 9 says, instruct the wise, and they will be even wiser. Teach the righteous, and they will learn even more. And in that illustration, she was using that you can't make everybody receive what you're trying to give them.
Right.
Wisdom, just like you used the illustration of the president, he got all these people around him in his cabinet that's trying to show him the right way to go, giving them the statistics, what it's going to take to try to get it down, but he's steady trying to do what he want to do because he think he know more. He want to do his thing, and that's the way that that's different between being wise, having wisdom, and being foolish, is that you're not willing to listen to when somebody trying to give you constructive criticism, telling you the proper thing to do. And in doing so, Solomon wanted to illustrate in his lesson that he was saying that wise reflects on the behavior of the scoffer versus the wise. It said that the scoffer is a very ignorant and self-centered person. A lot of times people so caught up in themselves, they don't think nobody know anything else but themselves. They're not willing to listen to wisdom. They want to think everything they doing is out. Matter of fact, they go as far as they do not like for anyone to criticize them. Have you ever had anybody that you try to correct and they take the wrong way? You just trying to help them, and the first thing they do is get mad because you done corrected them. That's people in this lesson, just like Solomon is trying to illustrate, that these people are markers. They're going to try to hate you because you're trying to do better for you. You're trying to show them show them some wisdom and let them show them how to be wise in their decision making. Yes, sir.
Yeah. And sometimes we get caught in the same situation where we are in need of wisdom.
Yeah.
But we don't want to seem weak to the world.
True.
We look successful, we act successful, but we still have more to learn.
Exactly.
And sometimes we think if we ask for help, we show weakness.
Exactly.
That's why some people can't depend upon God because they don't want to show they're weak. Some people think that because we serve God, because we depend on God, because we pray to God, we're weak.
Exactly.
I'm not weak, I'm just incomplete.
Exactly.
And I need God to complete me.
And that's one thing that we're going to go in the next part of it. We're going to show where Solomon is bringing the fear of God into it, where he says that a wise person will appreciate. Now, he said that the ones that's the simple-minded, they do not like anyone criticizing them. So they are responded by hatred towards you. And when people try to correct you and show you the proper way of going, or a proper way of doing something, they get mad at you. And it said, but however, a wise person will appreciate for him giving knowledge and love the giver. They'll love the person who's trying to help. You should appreciate when somebody's trying to show you something. And this is what Solomon is trying to bring out, is that Lady Wisdom is trying to bring a group of people into her feast to give them knowledge, to give them better understanding on how they can live better, to make better decisions, rather than just sit around and think about what their own personal beings is. Go ahead.
Yeah, so, on her original invite, she invited everyone.
Exactly.
She specifically said the one that were the least, but her invitation went out to everybody.
Yes, sir.
So everyone who came to our table may not been on the same knowledge level.
Exactly.
But if my thing is, if you use your knowledge and use it in a wise way, you still can help someone who doesn't have much.
Exactly.
You got to use what God gives you.
Exactly. And it's a saying that once you get too old or too smart to where you can't learn no more, that you're not living any longer. You're alive, but you're not living, because anybody can learn from anybody. I have a 4-year-old granddaughter. that teach me stuff on the TV and stuff all the time. So you ain't never to where you can't learn from somebody. And the young people the same way. If you've been on the job, you will go to a job, and somebody been there 20 years, and they trying to show you the proper way of doing it, a best way of doing it, and you won't listen. That means that you simple-minded, because you get in your own mind, you want to do everything your way. And see, that's the difference between being wise and being foolish, because you're not willing to listen to wisdom from a person who you know that should know more than you do. Go ahead, bro.
I interview people for jobs all the time.
Mm-hmm.
One of the questions is, I will ask you, what are your greatest strengths?
Correct.
Then I will say, give me one
weakness. That's right. That's right.
And you'd be surprised how many people will say, I don't have a weakness.
Oh.
You know.
Yeah, I understand.
If you're living and breathing,
you got a weakness.
You have a weakness.
Exactly.
And when you don't claim and own your weakness,
that's right.
Your weakness will bring you down.
Exactly.
But the ones who know they have a weakness, they're willing to work on it. They're willing to improve. They're willing to get better. But the ones who say, I don't have a weakness, you can't tell them.
Yeah, and see, that's what Solomon is bringing out in these two verses. He's saying that don't bother correcting markers, because they want to mark you. You tell them something, you try to give them a better way of doing it, a better judgment on how to do something. They're going to hate you for it, because they don't want you to try to correct them. They don't want you to try to give them any type of wisdom to make them wiser in their decision making. But he said, well, correct the wise, and they'll love you. The people who want that. It's just like Jesus. When Jesus was on earth, everybody didn't want to hear Jesus. So why you think everybody gonna hear you? But what you got to do is you got to be the one that be willing to receive the wisdom and the knowledge from somebody who you know to get it. Don't be like the simple-minded people who think that they know everything. Because you got money don't make you know everything. Because you got fame don't make you know everything. And because you got good jobs, that don't mean you know everything. Because you over somebody, that's one of the things that I do when I'm in the store. I'm in management. But I know I got to listen to my people and understand what the people not only think I'm so smart and I know everything, I ain't got to listen to them. You got to listen to them too. Because it's 6 or 7 heads is better than one. So you're going to get a better understanding. That means their knowledge and my knowledge come together. We'll work well together. And this is what Solomon is talking about, is that the wise willing to listen to wisdom. They want to learn more. That's why he said, instruct the wise, and they will even be wiser. Teach the righteous, and they will learn even more. You got to be willing to learn. Solomon in the illustration, and we're still talking about Lady Wisdom. We hadn't got to Lady Folly yet, but we're going to get there. We're on our way there. But the thing is that he was talking about Lady Wisdom is the one that wanted to teach everybody. You shouldn't discriminate on who you teach. Like we said earlier in the lesson, that she invited everybody. The ones who was on different levels, and then the ones that, just everyone who's willing to learn. We all got to be willing to learn, because none of us know everything. And you got to have open mind to be willing to want to learn more about what God wants us to do. And that's how you gain wisdom, by willing to learn about understanding, willing to know knowledge about how God expects us to live. And then we move on to verse number 10. Verse 10, it talks about, Solomon brings out here, fear of the Lord is the foundation of wisdom. It said, knowledge of the Holy One results in good judgment. He goes on to tell us that, now he already told us, don't worry yourself about teaching people who don't really want to be learned, because you got people in this world that ain't going to want to listen to you. But you can't be mad. You just got to keep moving on. Teach the one and show the ones that are willing to learn. But you got to be willing to learn as well. You can't teach somebody. To be a good leader, you got to be a good follower. So if you don't know how to follow, you can't be a good leader. So that means you got to be willing to follow first. And then once you become a leader, still be willing to follow and receive knowledge. Solomon explained this. He said the wisdom begins in the fear of the Lord. He illustrated this and said, knowing of the Holy One, insight, which is God Yahweh. This is who we're talking about. Knowing, knowledge of the Holy One is insight. That means you got to know who God is. First of all, you got to fear God. You got to fear the Lord. And he said, fear the Lord. He said back then and even today, wisdom begins when we choose to live our lives in awareness that God sees how we treat others, one another. That's even wisdom, how you treat one another. Not just how you want to be treated or you think you so much better, but how you treat one another. We in a time now to where we see people finally coming together. They seeing black lives being destroyed, killed, black men and black women getting killed on a daily basis for no reason. Now we seeing that people trying to get an understanding on how we should treat one another, regardless of what color, your race, or whatever. But he said that you got to have an understanding on how God sees how we treat one another in the earth that he has gave us to steward over. So it ain't no one person, no one group of people, but we all got to have the knowledge and the understanding that we fear God first. The fear of God, the fear of the Lord. That means that not that you got to be afraid of him, but you got to fear that you know you got a higher power above you that can control any and everything that you need in the control. You got to fear him to mean that you got to respect him. It's just like a parent. You shouldn't be afraid of your parents, but you should fear them. In the aspect, you know what they can do if you don't do what you're supposed to do. And it's the same thing with God. We should fear God, that we know God is a higher being, higher power above us, to where he can control things. He created the earth. He had power to heal the sick and do all other things, do all these miracles and other things, but he has power to where we see God being able to do it. So we got to fear God, the Lord, first. Go ahead, Brother Rico.
They didn't come in.
Mm-hmm.
I had to repeat what I said because they can't hear me.
Okay.
But one, we have to have a reverence for God.
Mm-hmm.
And our thing is at what time in life do we reverence God? Yeah, I'm talking about, do we give God, his just due?
Correct.
Yeah, do we give him his just due? As we teaching our young people as they grow up, or we just trying to get it in when we're too old to do anything else?
Exactly. And when I was studying my lesson, I was going through some of the commentators. It was talking about how as we get older, it's still our responsibility to give wisdom to the younger people. A lot of times we live in a generation now that this younger generation don't want to hear from us, but we got to still be willing to give this younger generation wisdom about life. Now, just like God, when Jesus was on earth, when Jesus walked earth, everybody didn't want to listen to him. But the ones who's willing to listen, that's what Solomon is talking about, the ones that's willing to learn, the want to learn. And you do have some out there who want to do it, but it's kind of funny to me to see younger people willing to listen to younger people before they listen to an elderly person, because they want to somebody who around their age, who don't have no more wisdom than they do, but they willing to listen to them before they listen to a person who got some experience, who got some knowledge. When they're dealing with their parents, they want to listen to their buddies or their friend girls or their girlfriends or however they want to call them now. Their associate, they'll be willing to listen to them over a person who got some experience, got some wisdom on them.
So the question is, to me, it's like they want to only take advice from someone who looks just like them.
Exactly. Exactly, because their understanding is they want somebody who more that's going to agree with them, and they figure they can relate to what they're going through because we're the same age.
Right.
But you're not understanding. You can't get something from somebody who don't know no more than you do. And see, wisdom comes from being willing to open up and listen, and understand, and want to learn more about it, rather than saying I'm gonna listen to them because I know that's supposed to be my so-called friend.
I, one thing I don't want to do, I don't want to tie down wisdom to an age.
Exactly.
You know, I don't want to say that once you so many plus years, that's only when
exactly.
wisdom counts.
Exactly.
Wisdom is when you use God's word,
Exactly.
whatever age you're at.
Yeah. And that's not to say young people don't have wisdom. Some people do have better knowledge and understanding on certain things. But the thing is, you have to want to receive it.
Right.
You know, and it's not so much, like I said, about age. It's not about if you're young or old, because you got some young people got a lot of wisdom because they might experience some stuff in life. And they might know a little bit more. Not saying, and they're not saying that the young people should be willing to talk to somebody, because it's good you have somebody you can go talk to that's going to give you some good wisdom and good understanding on making good decisions. Because some people don't give you good ideals or tell you right to give you that decision making. And that's what this is about. First of all, you got to have the fear of God. That's what wisdom comes from, that you got to know God, that you understand that God is the one that gives us this wisdom. You know, knowledge, you can get in the book, but you can't get wisdom unless you know who God is. God would give us that wisdom that's inside of us.
So the thing is, you can have knowledge, you can be wise.
Yeah.
But it still takes God
Exactly.
in that to give you the wisdom to use all of that.
Exactly. When to make good judgment. And that's what it's about. A lot of people that you done seen that had probably had good book sense, were very knowledgeable, but they didn't have the wisdom of God. So they actually end up doing stuff that people were surprised that they did, because it's more than just having knowledge about what you do and what, but it's got to be the judgment of making good decisions, a good judgment when it come down to everything in your life as well as everything that you're doing towards other people. That's why I said it in here in the earlier part of the lesson, that how God look at us on how we even treat one another. That's making good judgment. That means you're not gonna mistreat somebody just because of their color, or because you think they might have more than you have or have less than what you have. That's not good judgment. God wants us to treat each other as equal. And it goes on to say, and here it said that Solomon reveals, whether God we revealed, it said that wisdom happens when we realize that we deals with life in general. Reveal it where we are revealing God or not. That means that we want to get closer. We should have a relationship with God, to where this relationship, the worship that enabled us to hear wise saying from the Spirit. That means if you got God first, if you fear God, then you're going to be listening for God to give you the wisdom and the understanding and you listening to him. You're not listening to everybody and all these other things. It's just like the president. He won't listen. And you have other people, even though you got people telling you wise things, but you got to be willing to receive it. And that's one thing about it, that you got, wisdom comes from want to learn. You got to want to learn. You just can't just say, well, I think I can do it by myself. No, all of us got somebody. Somebody always smarter than I am. Somebody got more wisdom than I do. I can tell you certain things and certain things I can't. And that's what wisdom come in, that you're willing to learn and accept what you don't know, but you're willing to learn. All right? And moving on, the last part of this lesson, we have talked about wisdom and the building her house, also the way she built her banquet. You know, how well she had a nice house. She had put everything together, had put all of it, set the tables, and made sure she invited everybody. And then she's only go on and saying she just gonna, she invited everybody, but she want everybody to come in. Some people you ain't gonna be to teach. Exactly what she said. So she's not gonna be to teach everyone, but she said, fear God, fear the Lord, is the foundation of foundation. Then he said, knowledge the Holy One, which is God, Yahweh. You got to knowledge who he is, that he really is who you say he is. Then we go into the next part of the lesson when it's talking about the folly. The other young lady who has put a banquet, wanted to host a banquet as well. And he named this, the woman's name was Folly. Folly was a rash woman. She was ignorant and did not know it. It said that she sat at her doorway on the heights overlooking the city. She called out to men going by who was minding their own business. She was saying, come in with me, and she urged the simple, those that was lacking in knowledge, she says. And it goes on to say that in this invitation that the foolish woman is folly. Invitation of her banquet was directly different from the wise woman, which is wisdom. And it said that, first of all, this woman was brash. That means she was loud. And back then, symbolism of a person that was loud, that means it was of adultery person. And it meant that this person was bringing just attention to herself just for that. If you notice, Lady Wisdom invited everybody to her banquet. Lady Folly, she invited men. She was overlooking her city and inviting nothing but men that was passing by. All right.
But the thing is, she was using the same words.
Yep.
That Lady Wisdom was
The
using.
same words.
Same. Look at verse number 4.
Uh-huh.
Look at verse number 10.
Yep. The same exact word. Exactly.
So it's telling you that just because somebody say something is
Exactly.
so nice,
Oh yeah.
their intentions may be totally different.
And it was. And that's a great illustration because this is the same thing. She was loud. Now she didn't have the fancy house and it didn't have her maids go out there and invite people. She was on her own front porch hollering out.
She was being enticing.
Enticing. She tried and notice she was just calling for men. So her objective to her banquet was totally different from Lady Wisdom, because Lady Wisdom wanted everybody to come to receive more knowledge, where the Lady Folly, only thing she was trying to invite was the men.
Yeah. So one was appealing to, hey, let me give you something to make you wiser.
Exactly.
While the other was trying to appear to the nature of a man.
As nature, and exactly right. That's why it said that she was loud. It was a brash woman, and she was a symbolism of an adultery person, and she lacks good judgment. And they said she was ignorant. Said the foolish woman did not even try to hide her intention. She never hid it. She wanted to let them know, you come to my party, we're gonna have fun.
Yeah, stolen water.
Stolen water. It even go into say that she had didn't even prepare her own meal. She stole it.
Yeah.
She went in there and stole water, and it said that she intended to grab the attention of these who was gullible. She wanted the simple-minded to come, but she didn't want to teach them nothing. She wanted them to come and to conversate with them, to come to her banquet. It said Lady Folly did not even work. He didn't even have a job. So you know how she was making her money. She had to live. She had to live. So even though the lesson didn't bring all that out, but he said she didn't even work, didn't even build her own house, didn't even prepare her own, didn't even get her own food. To say she stole it, it said in the contrast of the women, the wise woman's feast, the foolish woman offered stolen water. Let me read. It said that, and it said that in her invitation, She was standing out. She was out there on her doorway, hollering for men as they passed by, and as she was hollering, "Come in." Same as the wise woman, but she was saying she was urging the simple. To those who lack good judgment, she said. She was bringing the one. She didn't want everybody to come because she know everybody wasn't trying to get. She wasn't trying to get. She had one intention, and that was to get them into her house and to seduce them. And they come into our house thinking, they wasn't thinking about trying to receive no knowledge. They was trying to do something in a simple way.
Yeah.
And she had sin on her mind.
So, but what stood out to me was that every man that she called to was seemingly on the track.
Exactly.
Going about his business.
Exactly.
They weren't intentionally looking left or right.
Exactly.
But they were going about their own business, but because they weren't founded solid on whatever word they was living on.
Exactly.
She was able to draw their attention.
Exactly. And it's the same way in the world we live today, is that temptation is all over. And it just depends on what your mind and where your heart is. If your heart is in God, to where that you got to actually literally have your focus on God, not on men. And to end it off, say folly, she invited these men in, and as she invited the men in, she had her biggest thing. She felt stolen water was good. She had bread to eat that she had stolen. So everything that she was trying to give them was stolen. She was just trying to get them in for her pleasure and the pleasure of them. She wasn't trying to give them no wisdom, no more knowledge. She just wanted them to come for her pleasure. And you know, if they was getting pleasure, she got pleasure out of it as well.
Yeah, and commentary that I read, it was saying that the stolen water and the sweet bread
Yes.
was the image of a matrimony or a marriage.
Is there?
That, hey, trying to tell them, hey, what's good over there is
sweet over here. Exactly. And that's how temptation gets you. They get you, sin is something that'll get you. It ain't always bad. You're going to have bad results. Yeah. But a lot of times when you're sinning, it's something feel good to you. That's why it's easy for you get tempted, because you know it's something that's going to make you feel good. It may not be good for you. Ain't good for you, but it is something that people just like. She wanted pleasure, and she wanted to give them pleasure. And that's what she was announcing for them to come to her banquet for. Pleasure. But that pleasure turned into sin. And that's why in the last part of the lesson, it was talking about that, but knowing not that the dead are here, and that they are her guests, are in the depth of hell. That means that her purpose is for you to sin, not to receive any wisdom, but to sin and engage in sinful action.
They're going to lead
to death. And it's going to lead to death. That didn't say they was going to be dead in the house, but whatever action they was going to do at this banquet was going to lead to sin, and it was going to lead to their death and the spiritual death that they had.